Hey guys, and welcome to the status report highlight for the 14th of August, 2015. As mentioned, this week's status report will consist of the RTX 2015 presentation in full, with slides and proper audio. For a quick recap of what the focus has been over this week: items stuck in hands, player desync issues, player animation glitching, server crash bug fixing, player shouldering issues, server performance optimization. Obviously, not all of these issues are blockers for stable, but many of them are tied to related causes. We'll continue iterating on experimental branch until we have a build we're comfortable moving to stable branch. All of the team here are eagerly looking forward to releasing 058 to the main branch, and starting on 059 experimental. Next week we'll return to the standard status report format, but for now, here is the RTX 2015 talk in full. So I just want to give a huge thank you to Brian Hicks for thinking of recording the audio in a high quality while he was at RTX for us all to listen to. So go give some love to Brian. And here's where the video gets kinda lengthy, guys, but there is an amazing amount of new information that lead producer Brian Hicks has fed to us while he was at RTX event in Texas. Or as always, going to the official status report itself for the most amount of information that it holds. All links will be in the description, as well as for DayZ TV for your latest DayZ news and information. And I'll see you peeps next time.
Okay, we're gonna kick off. I'm gonna go through a whole bunch of text. I apologize, I sat up all night trying to trim this down, but there were points I wanted to hit. And then we've got some stuff I want to show you of what's coming up in 5.9, which will be coming out on experimental after 5.8 hits stable. And then we'll talk about some of the stuff past that, go over some concept art and some ideas we have to add in some mechanics that we've been talking about for a while. So I have to assume that not everybody that sees this will exactly know what DayZ is, so I'm going to hit a couple quick high points on what DayZ is. It's a post-apocalyptic survival sandbox. The idea being to scavenge, slay, and survive. I think that's been on our website for a while. And in my opinion, the most memorable experiences come from the interaction or avoiding of interaction with other players. We entered early access in the last 2 weeks of 2013, so I really thought I muted my phone. I am sorry, guys. There we go. So technically you could say we came out in 2013, but just barely. Our current goal for beta is the end of this year. That's what we're currently targeting. Now things could happen that'll push that out, but we do try our best to keep you guys advised via our weekly status reports, which you can find over at DayZ.com. Our current goal for release from early access, so the release of the game, is mid-2016. Again, we will keep people updated on our progress with that. Our current stable version, that's our default branch on Steam, the most stable version that was available from the development builds as of, I think, 2 months ago, was 0.57. This build did introduce a massive rewrite of the inventory system, as well as the first functional iteration of our central loot economy, which allowed us control over the quantity of things, but it wasn't until later on in 5.8 that we were actually to be able to control specifically building per building, how many items spawn there. And then we rolled out our loot tagging system, which allowed us much more granular control over what spawns in those buildings. As I said, it's typical with the first iterations, especially with the inventory system. It was going to cause a lot of problems, and a lot of that was caught on stable branch and experimental, and we continue to try and resolve those. Normally, our stable branch strategy has been, I'd say for the last year to year and a half that we've been in early access, it's been we want to release every 30 days. That was Dean's original idea, but again, as I said at E3, no one, be the consumer or developer, really knew what to expect when we looked at the prospect of developing in the public, because we hit early access 3 months into our principal development. This is pretty new territory for everybody involved. That said, we've revised, say over the last month or so, how we're going to approach that. And we've been incubating builds longer on experimental with the aim of builds that hit stable branch to be a more enjoyable experience. Sure, it means we sit on things like 5.7 a little bit longer, but it also means that we're doing almost daily updates to the experimental branch for those that want to opt into that and see how that goes. And we pull metrics from the economy and the servlet to see exactly how players are doing, as well as we talk to folks on Twitter, we talk to folks on our forums to try and figure out what the major issues are there, so that when it does hit stable branch, it's less of a mess, ideally. So 5.8 is currently in final testing and bug fixing. That's what's on experimental right now, and that's what we're looking to push to stable any day now. We've just got a couple last blockers that technically, sure, we could put it to stable, but I personally want to minimize the amount of stuff that I encounter on stable branch, because I play a lot of DayZ. I think I've hit just over 5,400 hours myself. So I feel it just as much as anybody that plays DayZ when something stupid happens. And you're like, really, DayZ? Really? Like, I'm pretty sure I've been caught saying that on stream. Like, this game, man, Jesus. So the idea is to reduce that, because I want people to have as much fun as is possible while the game's still being in development on stable branch. I'm okay with it breaking on experimental. That's the idea. It's opt-in. Not everybody stumbles into that. But I want it to be as stable as possible on stable. So 5.8, again, focuses around the further development of the central loot economy. It allows us, as I said earlier, to start staging the map so that we can, well, for those that play the DayZ mod, you remember there was kind of a linear progression almost on where you went from a fresh spawn. The end goal being the northwest airfield, right? Everybody wanted to get up there and find an automatic weapon. They wanted to get up in the forests up there and make their camp. And 5.8 with the iteration on the central loot economy has allowed us to start implementing that. And for those that have played 5.8, you know what I'm talking about. The loot is spread across the whole map because we have a maximum per building now. So you don't see the loot explosions you saw when the central loot economy first deployed. The system checks and goes, how many items can I have in this building? And I think the default is like 4, right? And then some of the points of interest have higher quantities like barracks and such, and the grocery store, the Nova office building, those kind of things. So it allows the system to spread it out a little more evenly. What this does mean is if you've played 5.7, you know it's kind of coastal chaos, right? Like everybody's got a machine gun. They're killing everybody on the coast. It's kind of madness. There's a sharp difference with 5.8. And it's going to be rough for some people that are used to being able to spend 5 minutes and get every item they need. Because now it's probably going to take a minimum of 45 minutes to hire to get that basic level of gear. We've pushed all the military gear up into those military bases along the northern and far western corners. And we've dropped the amount of higher-end weapons so that it takes time to look for them, while raising, to a certain degree, civilian pistols and basic firearms. Sporter 22, the Magnum, the Makarov. These are the kind of things that you should be able to find without too much time. But if you want to progress in the game, you're going to have to get off the coast and explore. Unless that's your cup of tea. If you're okay with killing people with the Makarov on the coast, the game will let you do that. But if you want to spend more time, you will get rewarded. Another big thing for 5.8 is, for those that are aware of 5.7, I mean, it had its own server crashes, but the average server uptime was no more than 4 hours. Right now, we're looking at an average uptime of 12, and we've actually tested the servers running upwards of 45 hours without a restart, and everything's operating just fine. Loot is respawning, server performance is staying up, so I strongly believe this is going to completely change how your interactions with players occur, because you're not going to worry about that server restart. You're not going to worry about the server crash. You're going to go through multiple day-night cycles with accelerated time. It's been an amazing experience for me. Just in this build, I've probably put in upwards of 200 hours playing with friends on weekends after work. It's been very, very engaging for me. And it's got its bugs, but damn, it's been fun. Item cleanup, respawn, dynamic events, persistence, and player storage are all functioning and playable. That means people can start to make their camps, people can start to hide their items. Loot will respawn without a server restart, and helicopter crashes and police cars, such like that, are on their own independent timer, completely separated from server restarts. So a helicopter crash will spawn in, and 4 hours later that thing is cleaned up and a new one, and one of any 100 points spawns out there on the map. So you can continue to hunt for rare items if you're the type of person that is constantly moving around that high-risk, high-reward area. So let's go over our first quarter goals. And I'm going to try and make this really quick because we've already done a Q1 review, but I felt it needed to be talked about. So basic vehicles, that was our quarter one goals. And that was, for us, the V3S utility truck. That allowed us to test the attachment of parts, the different modules of vehicles, different types of fuel. It uses diesel, whereas other cars use gasoline. Once we got into parts, it uses glow plugs over spark plugs because it's a diesel engine. Um, it uses a very large truck battery. What the hell? It uses a very large truck battery that is, I've heard streamers refer to it as a DayZ Lego brick. It's really big, and it's required for that vehicle. Advanced loot distribution was the first iteration of the central loot economy, which ended up making its way off and on. We kept having to toy with that because we kept running into problems, whether it be the cleanup of items, which is part of this system, or the respawn of items. It had to be working right. We pushed out the first iteration in Q1. We had problems with it. We had to pull it back. We had to fix said problems that we encountered. That came up as, the first iteration of centralized economy control. Now the big thing that everybody keeps asking me on Twitter, the new renderer. Now, we talked about this in detail on the 30th of June status report. One of the things I hit on is it's not a major task to write a rendering module for an engine. What is a major task for us was going through and completely separating where the legacy render touched the simulation, which was everywhere. It was akin to looking behind your television at your entertainment center and seeing a mess of wires after living in an apartment for like 5 years. It was that bad. We had to spend a lot of time pulling it out in a separated branch of the main trunk. And then once that new module is written, then it's a matter of making sure that all the areas that were dependent on the legacy render can touch the new render. And that's what takes the time, is making sure that when it makes it to the consumer's hands, it functions properly and it at least looks on visual parity with what we had before. That's very, very important. And obviously one of our goals for this to hit, since it's taken so much time, is we absolutely, positively have to see some kind of measurable, noticeable performance gain in cities. We can't push it out to folks if we don't have that yet. And tests internally have been promising, but we're going to have to wait until we're ready to start pushing it. And we're probably going to have to push it to an opt-in branch first, because there's a ton of different hardware configurations out there. And we need to make sure that when we push it out there, that we don't break a quarter of the audience's DayZ experience. It has to work right. The new infected AI was also marked for Q1. The initial implementations were rolled out to experimental and stable, and it functioned much better than the legacy AI. Our current goals right now, because we had to scale back the quantity of infected in 5.7 and 5.8, I believe, is improving the cost, the resource cost that these AI have on the server. We're starting to get to a point where we're much happier with how the infected operate. Obviously, their models and their sounds and their attacks are going to be changed, but the actual technology, the AI, we're feeling much better about. And you started to see that when you saw, I think we had upwards of 1,500 infected on one of the test builds, but it cannot. I cannot increase infected on the stable branch experience until I know it's not going to compromise the gameplay of the existing systems. I could throw 1,000 out there and the server could chug along and you guys wouldn't have a good time. It's important that when I increase infected AI, that my team is confident that the resource usage of them is not going to compromise the gameplay. And that's our goal right now when it comes to the AI systems, is optimizing their resource cost. All right, the basic stealth system is also tied into the infected AI, and for those that were able to test that when we had the quantities up, you'll notice a big difference. The original AI that we had in the game, it bugged the hell out of me. You could be a kilometer away from an AI, it seemed, and you just look at them and all of a sudden it'd be like, I see you, and they would come straight for you. It made no sense. He'd call it eagle vision. It was horrible. I did not like it. I don't think anybody on the team liked it. The new stealth system that rolled out meant that you could, again, just like in DayZ mod, crawl and crouch and slink between buildings. And it was only until the AI had really been confident that they had seen you and heard you that they would go for you. So that actually started to work to a level that I was starting to feel comfortable for it to be something that people play with. But again, that's dependent on us increasing the infected AI amounts. So yeah, I talked over here about crouching and keeping a low profile. Diseases. So the first disease we rolled out was that brain prion disease. You know, when you eat people and you start laughing. Yeah, I love that one. Especially, you know, you're running around in the middle of the night and it's raining and all of a sudden you hear that cannibal laugh. That scared the shit out of me. And the next iteration on the disease system was cholera, which I believe we introduced in 5.7, which came from drinking untreated water, which is why you now need to use those water purification tablets if you're not healthy. You can get, you can get cholera, and it will rapidly drain your resources. We want to expand upon this as development goes on, start introducing more and more diseases that you have to use specific medical and preventative items to keep your character healthy against the environment dangers. Improve cooking and horticulture. Again, that came out as a prototype, different types of plants that you can grow, the stages of said plants, and that's going to continue to be tied into the persistent system so that you're, if a server restarts and you've planted, say, a field of, I don't know, corn or potatoes, that it's going to stay there. For those that don't want to go into the cities and scavenge for canned food, this is kind of a renewable resource that you can use in your bases. And the advanced anti-cheat. I don't think anybody that played DayZ can deny that prior to this rolling out, it was getting to be a mess. And we didn't have proper memory and process memory protection. We used Valve anti-cheat, but that could only take us so far, and it required a lot of interaction with Valve to report things. Early on, they didn't have the reporting API that they have now. Eugen, my associate producer, has taken lead on this, and since we rolled out the new kind of evolved form of BattleEye, we have cut off all public cheats available on DayZ completely. And we continue to be aggressive on the private anti-cheats, the ones that aren't sold, the guys that write their own cheat, save it between maybe 3 or 4 of their friends. That's kind of the next on, let's say, the headhunters list. We want to continue to chase this down, and we've started to work closer with Valve on their anti-cheat side now that they have an easy-to-use web API for reporting. So not only will people get BattleEye cheats, but they'll also get Valve anti-cheat flags on their profile if they have cheated in DayZ. Let's get to the quarter 2 stuff we haven't talked about. And let me check the time here, see if I'm talking too much. All right, yeah, we're not doing too bad. Advanced vehicles, repair and modification. For those that have played 5.8 Experimental, you'll see that we've rolled out the initial requirements. That's currently visible in fuel, tires, batteries, and glow plugs for the V3S. These all need to be installed and operating properly for the V3S to move. And they can be found throughout, you find a vehicle, you got to find the parts, bring it back, put it together. This is going to be expanded upon as we move forward as well. More parts for different types of vehicles, different types of fuel, and so on and so forth, different tires. Anybody else think it was really stupid that you could use the same tire on a bike that you could use on a Ural in the mod? I hated that. That's not the case anymore. All right, so yeah, as I said, 5.9 is going to introduce new vehicle types and expand upon this system further. Advanced animals, their life cycle and group behavior. Now this is actually in on 5.8, but we've got some nasty bugs that just make it look ugly as hell. So when the animals are currently, they'll get confused if they're separated from their herd, and they won't know what to do, and then they'll just start freaking out. They don't know how to get back to their herd. But when it works properly, when there's no bugs preventing, it can be gorgeous. You can sneak up on an elk or a big deer in the middle of a field, and you'll see him drinking from water or kneeling. And as we iterate upon this and resolve the bugs, they're also going to have their own, let's say, a resource path for their life cycle. They're going to need water and they're going to need grass. They're going to start moving amongst those areas. So if you're into that hunting play style, you can learn the paths of these animals and stalk them like a real hunter would. The player statistics, both the API usage and DayZ.com usage. This is actually in. You guys can't see it right now because it's not being tracked in the UI, but we are on 5.8 tracking base statistics such as how far you travel, how many infected you kill, how many players you kill or heal, and so on and so forth. And we'll expand that further as development continues. New user interface tech. So we have this currently available via an opt-in switch on Experimental Branch. The designers have not touched it, so what you see is purely tech. It's what we call programmer art, right? It's functional, and we're squashing bugs that come up on Experimental, like that wonderful side chat bug that occurred if you're running new UI. And I'm hoping to see this, once the designers get a hold of it and start rolling in how they want it to look. I'm hoping to see this completely replace the legacy UI fairly soon. Player stamina. This is one that will end up getting pushed to quarter 3. We just did not have the time to get to it, and Peter, my lead designer, has some outstanding ideas on how he wants this to function. He wants it to both be something that complements gameplay but does not hinder it. So we'll talk about this more as we get into quarter 3, but it has been pushed to Q3. Dynamic events, however, are completely functioning now on 5.8, which is a big thing for me because Dean was very skeptical of it when I wanted to bring it in. He didn't really like it in the mod, and I felt that, personally, part of that tenseness of DayZ is when you're up north where you know the helicopters are and you find one in the middle of a field, and they're always in the middle of the field. There's no cover near them, and you know that like that helicopter could have anything on it, some kind of just amazing loot that I want. But I'm going to have to make sure that when I run into this field that there's not people in the trees waiting for me, people hiding there. It's in, and I think it really does drive tension and player engagement for those that want that stuff, because there's always the people that want it and the people that want what the people that want it have. And it's completely functioning. They are respawning, they're cleaning up, they're moving across the map, and the same tech is actually tied into vehicles on how they spawn, and we're hoping with some tests later on, we might be able to do infected hordes with this same system, spawn them dynamically throughout the map as their own dynamic event. And again, our control over this is completely functioning via the same tools that dictate the economy, which means that we can change how many spawn, how fast they spawn, how quick they clean up without doing an update to the game. World containers, fridges, chests, and so on. It's kind of hard to find, but it is functioning in 5.8. We have a test fridge as a world container. Spawning, it saves in the same way persistence does, and we're hoping to see it replace the fridges that you see in homes and such, so that not only can this be something where you could potentially find some non-perishable food and resources, but you can stash items there yourself. The new physics system, and this is something that has actually been ongoing since before Q1. Now, currently underway, we have the physics system that we're moving to from the old Arma 2 RV legacy physics system is completely different. And because of that, what it means is in order to keep both systems functioning while the game's under development, the server is calculating both of them, and it's costing us some resources. Once the new system is finished, we can completely gut the old system, but the gameplay has to stay functional there. People have to be able to use the things that do use the old system until the new system supports it. For those that are curious, the easiest thing that you can see that uses the old system versus the new system is you launch a flare via flare gun. That uses the old physics system. Whereas you throw an item in game and then, you know, it kind of tumbles and so on and so forth. Or ragdoll, those are all new on the new system. Our vehicle simulation, for those that have tipped V3Ss, you're fully aware that it's completely different than either Arma 2, Arma 3, or Take on Helicopters, who we've all borrowed technology from. We have some very specific goals we want to hit with our vehicle simulation, and it actually turns out that comparing notes, the Arma guys have been wanting to do that for a while, so they'll be able to benefit from that technology as well. Okay, and I promise we're almost done with the long stuff. We have long-form engine tasks that are going to take time throughout development, the new player controller, the new animation system, new audio module, the new renderer, and the transfer from legacy physics system to the new physics system, and of course server performance optimization, network communication, traffic optimization, and bug fixing, and the list goes on. These are all things that the core engine and gameplay programming teams are focused on, and they continue to iterate and develop, and hopefully, I'd say within this year, we're going to see marked improvement in all of these areas. All right. And a quick recap, very quick recap on what happened at E3 for those that didn't see it. DayZ will support Steam Workshop as its primary method of mod installation and distribution. That means coming from those who played the DayZ mod, you know, at least until DayZ Commander came along, it was really difficult to install mods, and even harder to try and explain to your friends who might not be super tech savvy exactly how to play DayZ. I know there's plenty of friends, when I was playing DayZ mod, they were like, screw it, I'm not doing this, it's too hard. And I never got them to play. So Steam Workshop means a one-click install, and that's very important to us, that people be able to find their mods and install them like that. We will release a single-player mode based off of our 64-bit client. Now, not only, this doesn't actually, a lot of people have asked me, you know, like, why are you spending development time? And it actually doesn't take that much time. We're just talking about essentially emulating our server and our 64-bit client. The big plus for us is not only does it allow us to open up to those that don't want to deal with players, because someone will put a mod together to do this anyways, and it doesn't take us that much time. but it will allow mod authors to test a lot of their stuff locally before pushing to Steam Workshop or having to run a server. And that, I personally think that will help a lot when it comes to making it easier to develop mods for DayZ versus other Bohemia titles. And the DayZ server package will be released on Steam approximately about the time we hit beta. Awesome. The server package is a separate tool, separate software package on Steam that you'll probably find if you go into the tools section on Steam and you'll install it there. It's not actually the same software as DayZ itself. All right, let's talk about 5.9, which is our upcoming build for Experimental Branch. It should be hitting within weeks. We're going to expand on the existing 5.8 vehicle repair mechanics, more parts, more diversity on parts, and then tools, hopefully, in this build, tools required to do this. I'm sure Peter, my lead designer, is watching this and wants to kill me because he wasn't certain we could get that for this build, but hell, we're going to do it. Bug fixes focused on quality of life playability. This kind of touches back on what I was talking to you guys about earlier, about incubating builds on Experimental longer. As we get further into development, I firmly believe that despite the fact that traditional development methodologies might tell me, as long as it matches a developer's definition of not game breaking, that is completely different than a player's definition of not game breaking. So we need to incubate builds longer on 5.9 or on Experimental before they hit stable. This means we're still going to be, well, this actually means we'll be pushing out updates to the consumer faster, but it'll be on an opt-in branch. The stable branch will stay as strong as possible. So that's kind of a focus going forward, a bit of a change on our process, you could say. Animation glitching, new inventory-related issues, increasing quantity of animals throughout Chernarus, and then, of course, extending server uptime to 24 hours. This is a goal. I think we can pull it off. I honestly do. 24 hours, for me, I think at least on the official servers, is perfect. Server restarting only every 24 hours is fine. And I think it means that there's a very minimal point in which people might hit that server restart. And it means that a lot of players are just going to have a non-stop experience on one server, not having to hop, not having to remember what server you were on. That's really important to me, is keeping that server up as long as possible. And, of course, introducing new vehicles into the world. And, okay, all right. So this video runs about 5 minutes. I'm going to show you what's coming up vehicle-wise in 5.9. I tried to slim this down as much as possible, but I wanted to show you guys how the vehicles handled on different terrain, how they sounded, how they looked, and so on and so forth. So bear with me here. And by the way, when we get to the third vehicle, it was slow enough that I actually had to cut around because I wanted to show how it handled in different terrain. So you'll see me make some cuts, and it's purely because I didn't want the video to be 8 minutes long. PowerPoint. The idea with the hood being open here is that we want people to actually have to physically interact with the area of the part when they install it, rather than just looking at the vehicle. Out of the three, this is our fastest vehicle. I put it on this stretch so I could try and get it up to the top speed without wrecking horribly. Now these are all measured in kilometers instead of miles per hour. It's getting a little harder to handle. Come on, zoom in. There we go. Hit it at top speed about 160 kilometers. For perspective for Americans, the V3S currently tops out somewhere around 70. So this is easily the fastest vehicle in Chernarus. For all the models, we went off of inspiration of the actual types of vehicles you would see throughout Chernarus and the countryside in the northern Czech Republic that it's kind of based on. Now again, these are, as I said in the disclaimer, these models are still being developed, so you see there on the wipers we have an alpha sorting problem that was actually resolved about 2 hours after I finished rendering the video. Now the vehicle this was based upon is known for being able to go up just about any terrain. So that's one of the things we're aiming for the handling on this vehicle, is it pretty much goes anywhere. I believe the seating on this one is going to be 5. I really want the animators to allow me to have the designers configure it for a player hiding in the boot of the vehicle. Yeah, I mean trunk, sorry. I've lived in Europe too long. For those that might not recognize it, this is, I believe this is Sinistock, which is a small village a little north of the Northwest Airfield and La Patina. Don't come up there looking for my camp. Don't do it. Again, these are placeholder sounds. And this actually points out one of the things that I look forward to us resolving soon, is the sharp difference in volume between in-cabin and out-of-cabin. I absolutely loathe the fact that you have to ease sounds back if you switch to third person. It shouldn't be that loud. It shouldn't be that loud. And the party bus. And one of my favorites is each of these doors are fully usable and animatable. This actually was a must-have, well, for me, because of DayZ mod, specifically for grabbing newbies on the coast and sacrificing them, you know. One of the things I'm going to try, as soon as it's ready, is seeing if I can drive this off the top of Pit Kozlovka. Because I did it in the mod. It was awesome. So I cut up here because I wanted you guys to see kind of the turning radius on it. It's a beast when it comes to turning. You've got to be really careful. I believe this holds 19 right now. And the intent is for 4 to spawn on the map. So you could easily carry an entire server in a couple buses. I think I'm going to skip ahead up here because I wanted you guys to see the inventory. Or not the inventory, but the seating capacity. It's 19 players. Okay. So yeah, that's coming fairly soon to 5.9 experimental. They will join the V3S in the distribution of the vehicles. Obviously, the amount of vehicles is going to go up on the server because it's not just the V3S and the V3S Cargo now. Off the top of my head, I think we're going to scale back the V3S Cargo to 2. Don't quote me on this. I might change my mind. The V3S chassis to maybe about 4. 4 buses, I'm thinking 5 of the off-road hatchbacks and maybe 6 of the civilian sedans. And we can play with that dynamically. We don't have to issue an update to the game to increase vehicle spawns. Right now, 15. Roughly. There's 5 V3S Cargos right now and 10 V3S chassis. And we do have, obviously, new models in the works. This is just what we have ready for you guys right now. All right, let's talk base building. DayZ itself has expanded the limited base building options the DayZ mod presented, and I specifically refer to DayZ mod, not any offshoots. DayZ mod had one type of tent, as you recall, the pup tent. And it had, off the top of my head, it had the pup tent, It had some razor wire that didn't seem to stop infected. It had tank traps, which I did like for vehicle roadblocks, and it had sandbags. And I'm pretty sure that was it. So we currently have 3 types of tents. We have the barrels for multiple uses. That's storage, fireplace and lighting, clothing dye and leather tanning, and storing fluids, which will be a future addition. But I hope to see players be able to stockpile both fuel and water at their bases. Upgradable fireplaces, horticulture, farming, containers, backpacks. And what we have here is some concept art for what we're looking to do with one of the types of bases. One of the big things for me that I noticed looking at feedback from players on Reddit and on the forums and on Twitter is people seem to believe, and I think I hit this in a note further on, it's not a base without walls. I actually talked to some of the guys over at Portalarium in Austin. They do Shroud of the Avatar, and they agree the same thing. People don't really believe it is a base until you put walls up around it, and then it's a base. So we said, well, how can we allow people to fortify their bases? And what you see here is a concept based upon some discussions Peter and I had. The improvised camp is something he was pretty passionate about, and it goes off the concept of rolling out a construction kit. Let's say you put down some basic resources and you start adding into that, and you'll start building up things. We have improvised walls that will be based upon sheet metal and 2x4s. We have improvised towers you see up there with pallets and 2x4s and sheet metal that you can reinforce. We're hoping to put in some other items you see at the next concept art, like generators, floodlights, and so on and so forth, so you can start to actually reinforce that camp. Next up, we have kind of the militarized version of that. And what you see surrounding here is called a HESCO barrier. It's one of the first things I thought of when I thought about how we could introduce reinforced base building in DayZ without having to put in something that didn't felt like it fit, right? And we have a bunch of military camps, both NATO and Eastern, and all of them use what we call HESCO barriers. It's something you'll see in forward operating bases deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a fairly easy thing to set up. It just takes a little time. Those boxes come flattened, and you essentially pop it out, and you just backfill it with dirt, rocks, debris, so that it stops shrapnel and gunshots and so on and so forth. We want to allow at least 2 tiers of this stacked so that you can make walls that you can look over. So if you need to be able to shoot over your walls, you can. And within this same picture, you'll see we have the generators and the floodlights operating, so you can cover your area with light and illuminate, as well as different. These survivors have set up different tiers of the towers to give themselves overwatch outside their base. I want to point something out, though. I want to go back to this last slide. I don't know what my concept artist was thinking. That looks like an airfield. Who would set up a base by an airfield? That is crazy, and it's not even a military camp. It's an improvised camp. That's just begging to get raided. So yeah, it's important for us that players are able to reinforce their camps against gunshots and attacks, feel safe in their base, but also that when they do this, it doesn't look obtrusive. I don't want to see people building towers into the sky. There's going to be a Z-space ceiling and so on and so forth. I want it to look like it belongs. That's very important, that it doesn't pull you out of the game, like run into the forest and see somebody's made a wooden hut that's 6 stories high. It just makes no sense. It looks stupid, at least to me. I want it to feel like it belongs in DayZ, and I think that these 2 concept arts kind of show the direction that we're taking with this, how we want base building to work. Just a couple quick slides here, or points here. Again, it's not a base without walls, and that was important, that if we're going to expand upon what you can put in the base with the generators, the lamps, the storage caches, that you be able to protect it. And we need to be able to support an easy way for you guys to refresh this large base. For those that weren't paying attention or didn't have time to look at the status report, the last few ones we put out, we talked about the lifetime, how long things last in persistence, because obviously I don't want people to be able to fill up a public server with 1 million tents and it just never gets cleaned up and they never come back. We don't want that kind of crap cluttering the server, I should say. So we do have tiered lifetimes on objects and their time to the persistence. So most items on 5.8 have a 30-minute lifetime, meaning if they haven't been touched or interacted by a player in 30 minutes, they'll get cleaned up and another item will spawn somewhere else to replace that item's number on the server. When it comes to base building objects, they have a much longer lifetime. Right now on 5.8, we've set that to 45 days because we don't yet have the tech to allow you guys to refresh it easily by interacting with it. But by 5.9, we hope to allow players, when it comes to their tents and containers, that all you have to do is interact with it. Move an item, drop an item in there, it's refreshed. And it doesn't have to be you. It could be anybody refreshing your base so it doesn't get cleaned up. But obviously, as the base expands with walls and things like barrels and generators and weapon caches, there needs to be an easy way for people to refresh that without having to go to each and every item, and that's just ridiculous. So we're looking at technology that will allow us for you guys to refresh a base rather than every item in the base. Again, no base is impenetrable. I don't want people to put up this giant fortress and then another player comes across it and there's no way for them to get in. It has to be, DayZ's a permadeath game, and that means loss, and you need to be able to be vulnerable to that loss at all times. You should be able to protect yourself to higher tiers, but there should always be a way for that other guy to take your stuff if you're not aggressive in protecting it. So that ties into, you need to be careful where you set it up, not next to an airfield. The larger the camp is, the harder it's going to be to hide and defend. And again, it's a well-known fact that in DayZ you should not get attached to your gear. Now moving into this, we're going to talk about soft skills and what that means for DayZ. And this could either end up in you guys wanting to lynch me or you guys thinking it's a cool idea. But I think it's something we need to talk about and see what everybody thinks. So not getting attached to your gear led to the value of a character itself being trivial once he lost your gear. Like, how do you keep a player going if everything he has been taken? Someone handcuffs him halfway through the map, takes all his shit, and leaves him naked. How do we keep that guy playing that character? That's important. Like, I want him to continue, I want him to continue. So soft skills and character lifespan is intended to help curtail this. Character lifespan is going to provide a visual representation of the age of your player's character. Exactly how we expand upon that, we want to look at facial hair, maybe facial scars, that kind of stuff. Obviously, we're not going to be able to go into big, bushy, Duck Dynasty beards. It's going to clip things too much. But there's a happy medium in there, I think, between a fresh shaven face and the 5 o'clock shadow and starting to get into that kind of pedicured beard and then getting in kind of like a lumberjack chic kind of thing. And then, of course, scars and dirt and mud and so on and so forth. Because obviously one of the things we had to look at, the reason why we didn't even look into this earlier, was how do we get this to work for female characters too? Because obviously they're not going to be growing big old bushy beards. And that's where things like scars and dirty face and such goes into things. And we also want to allow people to be able to remove that, to change that, to try and pass themselves off maybe as a different person or somebody that's fresh spawned. So you should be able to go and wash your face and get rid of the beard and so on and so forth. Although scars will be much harder to hide. Soft skills allow us to grow what a person's character is. And it's very important that you understand moving forward that for me, soft skills can never, ever be allowed to replace something that would be touched by player ability. That would completely kill what DayZ is for me. The only things we can touch with soft skills are things that your personal skill has no impact on. We'll talk a bit about that here in the next slide. So breaking down survivor activities that are not determined by player skill into set groups that can kind of define what your character is. Obviously, I don't want to pigeonhole people into specific classes. I personally was more of a fan of, say, Star Wars Galaxies and Ultima Online character development than, say, World of Warcraft or EverQuest, which are great games, don't get me wrong. I still play WoW. I love it. It's just I prefer skill-based over class-based. So we have things like, a medic, a farmer, a mechanic, a hunter, so on and so forth. You could still define what your character was by that skill set in games like Ultima Online and Star Wars Galaxies without it being pigeonholed into a class. You could have, I guess conceptually, you could have a tank mage that baked bread in Ultima Online, technically. And we want to allow that to a certain degree. I love Austin. As particular skills raise, faster actions, higher yield, less materials used, and less tools damage taken. And by this, I mean kind of the reward you get from gaining these skills is, say, for example, cleaning a weapon or repairing an item, or maybe even transfusing blood would occur quicker if you were better at it. Obviously, if you're a fresh spawn character and you want to transfuse someone with the proper blood type, I think you would be a little bit quicker at doing this, your character, his animations, if you've done it 50, 60 times, rather than if your character's never done this before. And the same thing, we look into higher yield and less materials used. If you're scavenging for resources, maybe you'll find more sticks or more wood from something, or more harvestable crop from your horticulture if you do it more often. I'll do a Q&A right after we're almost done. And of course, less tool damage taken, because if you use a repair kit, like a sewing kit on an item, the more you use it, the more damaged it gets, and then you have to find another one. If you're much better at this, if your character has done this a lot of times, obviously you're going to damage that kit a lot less. And characters themselves, outside of skills, should be rewarded with more stamina the longer they're alive and the more they travel across the map. Once we get into the player stamina system, obviously it's going to impact how long, time-wise, you can full-on sprint, based upon the weight of items on you, how long you've been doing it. The longer your character's alive, the more he does it. I think the further your character should be able to sprint. And experience points gathered, this is very important, this is at least on a design standpoint, experience points gathered should scale up within a given skill set as a different scale of items are used. By that I mean, let's say you're using rags to stop bleeding, maybe that gives you 1 point. Whereas you look at maybe a medical bandage or transfusing blood gives you 2 or 3 points. The impact of what you're doing within a given skill set should yield a little more points. And obviously the next big thing that's going to be really important on the design side for the designers to tackle is ensuring, and this happened a lot in Ultima Online, soft skills raise according to time in game and time spent performing said action. Essentially what I mean is we've got to make sure that we put a limitation that both allows you to gain a rewarding amount of points from your time doing this, but we don't want people to just, sit there macroing bandage while their friend punches them to make them bleed for 12 hours. Like, that's not fun. That's not fun at all. We want people to actually be performing these actions and gain the skills. So we'll more than likely look at something that locks off how much you can gain per day per type skill, so that you're going to have to spend that time in-game performing these actions. We'll probably look at making sure that you can't reward points immediately after, like hammering a transfused blood or so on and so forth. It's going to be an uphill battle, and we're going to have to use experimental to try and mold it around how people play DayZ, to get it as close as possible to a functioning system that can't be gamed. And skills, again, I said this before, but they should never supplant player skill or directly affect combat. Yeah, there we go. That means reloading speed, hand sway, hold breath, none of that stuff should be hit by a system that you have no control over. You should have the same chance to win a gunfight as a fresh spawn than a completely military geared character, because in the end that's up to you guys, and we should never step in when player skill can be used, ever. It makes it I don't enjoy that kind of game. So we made it through, and I didn't talk as much as I thought I would. So do we have this, Guardians, do we have this mic set up for Q&A? That mic there in the middle, is that good? We're going to do Q&A. while they're checking out the mic, I'm going to go over, just to reiterate some of this stuff. So again, soft skills, it's very important that we do not impact what you guys can do as players. We want you to be able to try and craft your character into something that if you're in a group, can reward the group. You know, say you're the guy that repairs your clan's vehicles most often. The more your character does that, the quicker he's going to be able to put those parts on. The less damage is going to be taken to those tools and so on and so forth. If you're the medic, you're the guy that can transfuse blood or put a saline pack in under gunfire quicker than another person's character. That animation is going to play faster. Maybe there's going to be more blood or health regenerated from your action than, say, somebody that's never done it before. It's very important that in doing this, we also don't forget the hermit, the solo player. And that's where we tie in things like a higher yield from gathering or quicker actions in that player being able to mend him or herself. You know, say you're a solo player and you get shot when you're trying to get to a helicopter crash and you need to find cover. One of the first things, if I was in that case right now on 5.8, one of the first things I'd be thinking about, like on a tactical level, is how much time does it actually take to bandage? Because I need to find somewhere that I'm going to be far enough away from the person that shot me that I have time to bandage before they can flank around and kill me. And you see it happen all the time. If you watch streams or YouTube, people playing DayZ, they miscalculate that. They think they have the distance, but everybody's stuck to that one time frame on that animation. So the more you do it, the better you get at it, the quicker you're able to heal yourself and get to safety. So I think the microphone's working for Q&A. And I've got 15 minutes, so let's do some Q&A. Howdy.
I used to play back on the mod for you guys went Standalone,
Mm-hmm.
and I really liked a lot of aspects in that game, but I lost interest after I couldn't really get involved with the clan very easily, and I had a lot of schooling, so it was kind of, it was hard to keep up with any of those commitments.
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing anything in game for those players that, like any kind of, like maybe say like a bounty hunting system, or like radios and that kind of thing, like long distance radios?
To encourage player communication.
Player communication and almost more like adding a little more story to it. Like you come in as a fresh spawn, start getting some gear and stuff, and then maybe you find the ham radio and you listen to it and you hear somebody's put a bounty on for somebody else. And so you go, assassin, and collect the bounty.
Well, something along, at least on like a bounty system like that, well, I loved how it operated. Again, I'm going to reference Ultima Online. Forgive me. I loved how it operated on Ultima Online, at least in the late 90s. There was, if you were murdered by somebody, you could put a bounty on their head. It was reported to a bulletin board. If you killed them, you cut off their head, give it to a guard, got the gold. Fantastic system. I'm not 100% sure it has a place in DayZ. That said, there's nothing stopping players from doing that themselves. Now, when it comes to player communication and getting players to interact more, that's something that's really important to me personally. I want people to, for lack of a better term, I want people to feel compelled to talk to somebody before they shoot them, at least if that's their cup of tea. I do it a lot myself. If you watch YouTube at all, you can find, there's a YouTuber by the name of Mr. Blackout. I just, a couple weekends ago, I did a 10-hour marathon session on 5.8 with Mr. Blackout, and he put it into a mini-series of us playing. And you'll see, if you watch this thing, I don't get to fire a single shot in anger, but I keep getting shot. Like, I keep running up to people, hey, how you doing, man? And then bang, I'm dead. That's pretty much my experience. So obviously I want people to feel a reason to talk. And part of that is, well, you've seen short-range radios in DayZ that not many players use. And one of the things I want to try and see how players interact with that, and I was talking with Peter, my lead designer, and I think we're both on the same page with this, is we're going to look at maybe in 5.9 making the radio and a battery for it starting gear. So when you spawn in, you can turn that radio on and talk to people over, we'll probably make it maybe a 3-kilometer distance with that radio. We have in the works a longer range transceiver that you should be able to find and talk throughout the whole server's radius, the whole of Chernarus. Tied into that, one of the things we wanted to do with dynamic events was we wanted the the dynamic event when it spawns for like a Morse code or maybe a text transmission to play over the radio. So if you have it on you and turned on, you'll get the coordinates of this dynamic event, whether it be a helicopter crash, a police car crash. So you can go, oh shit, I know this map coordinate. You pull up your map, you go, it's right over here next to, I don't know, Green Mountain, and you have to make your way there, knowing that anybody else that has that radio knows where it is as well. So there's a lot of stuff we can do. And it's going to rely on us experimenting on Experimental Branch to see how players interact with it, to get to that point where we think they're finally incentivized to work with each other, if that's what they choose to do. Howdy.
So I know you spoke of the linear progression from the coast to more of the military areas and the barracks.
Mm-hmm.
How do you plan on making places such as the prison island and more isolated areas relevant to the player?
It's a good question. We talked, maybe it might have been a month and a half ago, about the future iterations on the central loot economy and how we want it to operate. One of the big things that not many people realize when they look at DayZ mod versus DayZ is DayZ mod had very few enterable buildings, very few, and very finite amount of potential points that loot could spawn. I think it might actually have been less than 10,000 potential items spread out through the whole Chernarus where an item could spawn. Whereas you look at DayZ, we're almost 2 million. So it's much more difficult for us to have a linear path. We wanted to expand upon what Chernarus was in the mod and make it a more living, breathable world and decentralize some of those points. And initially we thought that would work really well, but when we looked at player progression across the map, we realized there needs to be a happy medium between the two. Obviously we don't want A, B, C for player progression, but we do want to look at certain points of interest and make it more compelling for players to go there if they want certain things, so that we can start to try and funnel players into spots where they will interact with each other. Since, you look at the mod, if you wanted morphine, for example, there was a very small amount of points that you would go to, whereas we have medical centers and hospitals spread throughout all of Chernarus, so you can go to pretty much any town and find it. So the iteration upon the central loot economy past building maximums is a region control, where we can define with the back-end technology whether or not or which region a certain item spawns in. For one, this allows the map team to start using building models all over the map that they can only use in certain regions right now. And for two, it allows us to focus exactly in what regions are. So say the prison island is Region 4, and so is the Northwest Airfield, Kamensk Military Base, Mishkino Tents, Zelenogorsk, and Pavlova Military Base. Let's say all those are part of Region 4. So we define that in addition to what can spawn in just that building, we have specifically regions for each items. So we could say Prison Island, as you called out, let's say that Prison Island can only spawn prison military gear, and maybe Prison Island can also, since it's Region 4, we only allow in the structures there, all the different types of structures there, because there's some that are all over the map. The structures in that region are allowed to spawn, say, tranquilizer darts, if once we get to them, or maybe shotgun shells with rubber bullets. So we can start to add a specific reason to go to certain regions across the map. So region control is really it, is allowing us to define, let's say that, those camouflage buildings that have like a jail in them, like a military building? They're all over the map. So because of that, without region control, we have a very strict amount of items, type of items we can spawn in there. Once we add in region control, then it no longer matters. Those buildings can be all over the map, but only the ones in Region 4 could spawn the type of item you're looking for. So we define Region 4 as those high-risk, high-reward areas, and we don't have to worry about the building itself. Sure, it'll make it a little harder as a user to predict what's in each building, unless you know that I'm up in Region 4, it's high risk, high reward, there's going to be a lot of players here because they all want what I want, but this is the only place I can get that. I hope that answered your question. Okay.
This is about soft skills.
Okay.
So you don't think that they should
geez.
affect combat, but
There we go.
like reloading, holding your breath.
Yes.
But you allow for increased sprint speed, increased bandaging.
Not speed,
I mean,
duration.
yeah.
Yes.
Increased stamina. I just don't understand why, if the incentive is to keep the player alive, why you would say, well, you can't reload as fast or you can't hold your breath longer. Let's say a new spawn and an old player. They can hold their breath the same level of steadiness, but the old player can hold it longer.
Yes.
How is that? Is that unreasonable?
It can be a tough area, hands down, and it's going to take iteration and testing with the users on experimental branch. But for me, and this might just be me, I think Peter's in agreement with me on this, but I think no matter what, we cannot touch those combat areas that are directly player skill. Okay. So if it looks like things like the holding breath or maybe the speed of bandaging are affecting combat too much, then we can look at reevaluating that, and maybe the effectiveness is better instead of the speed. It's going to take us time to balance on how players adjust to it, but that's kind of the whole point of early access for us, is seeing how people play it rather than doing the whole thing behind closed doors, pushing it out, and people being like, this is horrible.